So can you walk us through, what is dispersion as a concept? What does it mean? Why should people care and who should care?
So let's dig into it indeed, as you say. So what is it and why should you care? So conceptually, dispersion is a risk measure, but one that is very different to the more familiar, perhaps, notion of market volatility. It is a very fundamental measure, and I use that both in the sense of it's absolutely core to understanding what's going on in the market, but also fundamental in the sense of stock fundamentals. Unlike market volatility, it is about the individual components as opposed to their combination. So the simplest description I can give you of dispersion is it is a measure of stock picking opportunity. It measures the distribution of individual stock returns around their average, and obviously their average is as represented by the index. In many cases, a picture can tell 1,000 words, and hopefully you can see a rather beautiful slide, if I dare say so myself, which explains visually the conceptual framework of dispersion. And it's showing you through two very different months, recent enough, for the S&P 500. On the left-hand side, you can see in red over a month the performance of the S&P 500 index, and in various different shades of grey, the performances of many of the stocks included in the S&P 500. The colouring system here is the darker the line, the larger the weight. February 2001 was an extraordinary period in markets. This was around the time of the GameStop phenomena. It was around a period in which the degree of idiosyncratic risk was unusually elevated. And what you can see very clearly on that left-hand side picture is a really broad spread of individual constituent returns. And actually, when we measure dispersion historically, that's what we actually measure. It's about the distribution cross-sectionally among stock performances. That is a very different market environment to the one that occurred a few months later in August of 2021. There you actually have an index move, which is kind of similar, right? But the narrowness, the breadth of the market hugely decreased, and the standard deviation across different stocks was much lower. Now, dispersion is like volatility in the sense that it is a measure of risk, right? That there is more risk of losing money if you're selecting stocks on the left-hand side than on the right-hand side. And like volatility, it's also a measure of opportunity. It is what additional value there is to be had in making a good selection versus a bad. And its connections to volatility are not just hypothetical. There's actually some deep, the same option mathematics that drives VIX. You can extend to the notion of dispersion, and essentially that's what we together, S&P, Dow Jones Indices, and CBOE have done, is take the historical concept of dispersion, as you know, fluctuations around average in stocks, the VIX methodology, the S&P 500 universe, and to build a forward-looking measure, the market's expectation over the next 30 days for what is dispersion in the S&P 500 going to be. So that was a sort of short. I could keep going, but as I say, a picture tells 1,000 words. Why should you care? Who should you look at it? Yeah, I'll go back to it. This is deep. This is fundamental. I have been personally watching dispersion on a historical basis for many years because it gives you perspectives on the risk, what kind of risks are driving markets, right? Are we worried about the top down, or are we worried about the bottom up? It tells you how the market is performing. You often have cases, and actually this year is kind of an example. Recent market environment is kind of an example where the index itself is not really moving very much. We're not getting many 1%, 2% move days. But if you just open the hood, you see there's actually a riot in underlying stock and sector performances. And that's something you only can get a handle on if you also look at dispersion.